So hi everyone, welcome to the SC Ventures International Women's Day panel session for today. My name is Fernn. I'm the Chief of Staff of Nexus. It's a venture backed by SC Ventures, and we are very, very happy to have all of you join us today. We'll maybe a bit of numbers, right? So we've got 250 signups for the event, and in 5 minutes we are hitting at 105 attendees already. So you can almost imagine today's session is going to be engaging, very, very powerful, and I am absolutely looking forward to speaking to everyone here. So just a bit of background knowledge. The theme for this year's International Women's Day is Choose to Challenge. And, today our topic is really about how the technology and innovation leaders can drive greater diversity and inclusion in their respective domains. So without further ado, I'm not going to talk too much. I'm going to open the floor to the panelists here. We've got an amazing panel. We've got Kat Rust, Global Head of Technology from Standard Chartered Bank. We've got Tanya, Rolfe, Managing Partner of HerCapital. We've got Alex Manson, the face of SC Ventures. And we've got Ros, who's on the session, but she's having a hardware issue, so she's going to come on very, very soon. So, okay, over to the panelists. Anyone wants to just do a quick introduction about themselves?
Sure. As Ben said, hi, I'm Kat Roost. I started off in the, did maths and management at university, went off and did join the chemical industry, then decided, no, set off to China, building factories, amusement parks and warehouses in 5 different cities in China. Then came back to Hong Kong, set up one of the top 5 internet consultancies before deciding to have my first child, then set up 8 companies, technology companies, mostly in the mobile space, having 3 more kids, and then joined UBS as head of innovation. And then recently, I've just taken the step and joined Stand Chart. So here I am. Over to the next.
That's
Anyone
impressive.
else?
I kind of wish I'd have gone first now. Now I have to follow that. I am Tanya Rolfe, as Fernn mentioned, managing partner at HerCapital. We're a venture capital fund here in Singapore focused on women-led companies across Southeast Asia. And prior to that, I was in London working at very large international law firms in the M&A corporate department, and that's where I spent most of my career. So this is my first foray into the investment world. Very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Ros, maybe? Is Rosaline able to speak or hear us?
Don't think she's here yet.
Alex, how about you go first then?
Why don't I go first? I'm Alex Manson. I guess I've been a banker for not quite almost 30 years, which feels weird when I say that. But 3 years ago, pretty much exactly, we set up SC Ventures, which is a business unit of Standard Chartered, aggregating the accelerator lab inside the bank, an investment effort where we invest in the partners we work with, and ventures incubation arm outside of the bank, so to say, in the sense that we build our own startups, and a number of the companies you may be familiar with, which have launched recently. But this is in a nutshell SC Ventures within Standard Chartered. Very happy to be here.
Okay, Ross.
Hi.
Oh, yes, we can hear you.
You may not be able to see me.
That's all right, Ross. So why don't you just take the airtime right now? Just give everyone a quick introduction about yourself.
I used to work for a Fortune 500 company. I was the head of Asia Pac. We grew 800%, but clients complained about us incessantly. So I finally figured out how to fix it, and I asked the firm for $10 million. And I did this for 5 years in a row. They never said yes. So finally, I took my own $10 million, my husband's $10 million, right, and my children's college fund, and I spent it all to start up CXA. So that's my story. And so far, I've raised $60 million in 3 rounds.
Amazing stuff. It's always very humbling, when we run a panel session and everyone's just the overachiever here. So for the audience, I'm just going to give you a bit of structure. We've got an hour. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend some time on some questions that we've curated, and then we'll open the floor to Q&A. So if you feel like you've got some comments, views, or any pressing questions that you would really like to ask the panelists, feel free to just put them on the chat. We'll field them accordingly. So without further ado, maybe let's just jump into questions, right? So maybe Kat, let's just start with you. A founder of 8 companies, and then now you're on the corporate side. So now that you have seen both sides of the ecosystem, going back to this topic on D&I, maybe just tell us more stories or struggles that you see from both sides, actually.
It's a good thing to have both together, because actually there are so many similarities. When I was working in China, I had 400 engineers, and we were building, these factories, etc. Things like the fact there was no female bathroom had never come up before. And so things like that, people don't actually consider the fact that you are at a disadvantage. So I had to go down and find a KFC down the street if I ever wanted to go to the loo. Another time, when I was working for, I was doing a lot of work for Sony Ericsson, and I had to find 500 developers globally and bring out the top 25 developers in each country. So this is across 20 countries. And so we'd turn up, and I'd meet with head of country, and the CTO and myself would meet with each of these developers. And I got there, and everyone assumed that I was the event organizer, right? So again, there are a lot of these things that you have to break through to even get noticed, right? That you have to really to try and make your mark and to try and be heard. And because you are generally, or there have been cases where it's very easy to ignore you. So it's those are things I think that happen on both sides. I mean, I think Sheryl Sandberg in her book talked about how, I think when she went to a VC meeting and she asked somebody where was the loo, again, they had no idea, considered it, right? Because they hadn't had enough female founders at the time. So I think that you find that's one thing, is actually you often aren't that cookie cutter. So trying to find a way to really create a personality, to have your needs met. And it's often embarrassing. Let's say you're working for a company that's very male orientated. If you're breastfeeding, where is there a nursing room or not? And if not, you're the one who has to bring it up, because they haven't had this situation before. So that can be a bit tricky. The other thing is that particularly in the tech space, there aren't that many women relatively, right? So it's a little less discovered, should we say. Developers are notoriously bad at promoting themselves. And so you actually have to look after all of your developers to make sure that they really are pushed in terms of that you're paying them what they're worth, right? But for women, it's even more important, because they find it very difficult. All developers find it difficult to ask for a raise, even if they're earning it. I had a very young female developer in one of my teams, and she was fantastic. And we'd rolled out this new holocracy model where everybody would, everything was very open. Everyone had access to our accounts. People would decide what salary they should be paid, and everyone discussed their salaries. And when people found out what she was earning, and it was what she'd asked for, right? And this was my lesson. All the other developers turned around and said, "But my God, you're probably the best one here." And so everyone re-agreed that actually next promotion came up, she would actually get the salary rise, right? So it was, but she was so shocked that people thought that of her. She had no idea. And so again, that unwillingness to come forward. So I think that's true of both corporate as well as startup, that there can be this unwillingness to self-promote and also.
The great points, Kat. I think plenty of the ladies here, in our session would actually resonate. Right, it resonates with the team. So maybe I'll just take this time to move over to Ross. So Ross, you are known for being that female CEO who took your life savings, your family life savings, and you plunge it all in and built this company that you're leading right now, right? It's a leading insurtech company. So maybe so adding on to Kat's points, specifically for female entrepreneurs? Were there specific issues that you faced yourself, or your fellow female entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I did. So in my second startup, during the .com, so I did a startup and two startups from 99 to 2001. One weekend, I discovered that my daughter had epilepsy and a learning disorder. And I was commuting to Chow and back during weekdays. So my husband didn't quit. I had to quit, right? We never consider him quitting his job. So I left, and it just wasn't the right time for me to be running a startup. Now that my daughter has recovered and gone off to college, that's when I started my startup. The second issue was early on when I pitched. One of the Silicon Valley investors told me that even though his female founders did better than the men, he told me that I totally underestimated my business. So he said that for male founders, he typically divides what they say by 10. But for female founders, he multiplied by 10. So only after that did I get better at pitching by listening to him.
Great there, right? So Tanya, when we talk about fundraising, automatically I'm going to be looking at you, right? So, there's been a great story behind how you started HerCapital. But, maybe my question to you as a venture capitalist, could you just tell us, why you started HerCapital, any hard statistics to share, and the glaring gaps that you actually currently see in your sector?
Sure. And actually, just to follow on from it, my answer kind of follows on from what Ros just said, that is the opportunity. That is the opportunity that I see, is that women are, as Ros pointed out, women are underselling themselves in their pitching meetings. And often that is it's largely pitching to male VCs. And so they're taking that pitch on face value. So not all of them are working in the way that was referred to, where they're saying, okay, so the female founder has said she's going to do X, but I think it's actually going to be Y. A lot of them will just take whatever is said on face value and say, well, that's not venture capital friendly or venture ready. And so we won't invest, but we will invest in all of these male-led companies that tell us they're going to, get us the moon on a stick. And what we're saying, and the opportunity we have at HerCapital is we can see that, and we can see, and this is not a lacking in confidence issue. It's just we can see what the difference is, and we understand that female founders are often thinking about the entire picture and risk, and prudent with their risk management, and therefore not overselling. So that's really the opportunity. But in Southeast Asia, where we're based, there's really not a great deal of female GPs. I mean, there's not a lot of female funds worldwide. I think it's around 2.5% of fund managers are females, which coincidentally is about the same number of venture capital funding that goes to women-led companies. There may be some correlation, perhaps, and my view is that more female fund managers, more diverse fund managers, correlates to more diverse founders receiving capital. And so there's an opportunity in Southeast Asia, in Singapore and the greater region, in that there really is not a lot of competition for us as a fund, and we recognize that a lot of female founders actively seeking out women fund managers, because where are they all? And particularly women that are building companies that are focused on women. It's very hard to pitch those businesses to all male VC teams. I think 76% of venture capital funds in Southeast Asia don't have any women in the decision-making roles. So, over 3/4 of your pitching meetings will be all male teams. That's pretty tough for female founders. Those building, traditional, non-female focused businesses and otherwise, it's tough. And we just see that as an opportunity, an arbitrage opportunity for us based on women, women performance, the financial performance of female founders is outstanding. So this is not just this will all be nice and to make the world a fairer place, but actually it's a financial and a smart investment strategy we have.
Okay, so that's great, right? So, I'm just very cognizant there are like 134 attendees here. So any VC firms here, if you are looking to hire, I think this is a great platform. Correct. So Alex, I haven't forgotten about you. I'm going to be very, very cheeky here. My question to you is, how does it feel to be the only man on this panel today? And you're surrounded by all these wonderful overachievers. Please share with us, what are some of your thoughts? Alex, you're on mute.
Sorry. Feels pretty good. Thank you, Fernn. Thanks for asking, but it feels pretty good. I'm pretty comfortable being surrounded by women as well as overachievers, and I guess that's it's kind of a nice combination. Reminds me obviously of an element of correlation between overachieving and diversity, which I think we'll reflect on later in the conversation. But in order to overachieve, you kind of have to have diversity, including but not limited to gender diversity. And I just wanted to also reflect quickly on some of the themes that came up from the other panelists. And I'm not the best person, obviously being a guy, I'm not the best person to reflect on it. But there is I've encountered it being at the receiving end of it. When female professionals are a little less confident, a little less sure they can do it, and you contrast this. And by the way, I came from not just banking, but sales and trading first, then investment banking. So if you ask a male investment banker, can you do this? The question that comes back is, it's not can I do it? It's how great will I be at it? Right? How great will I be at it? How exceptional am I? Whereas you get a much more nuanced pitch from female professionals, even not necessarily in the startup land. And so I've had a number of conversations over the years of I trust you, why wouldn't you trust yourself? And almost pushing somebody to go for it, and it's a difference which I'm not necessarily looking to change, people who they are, and I'm not suggesting for a second that women should act more like men or the other way around. I think the key probably is more an element of awareness of the fact that's the case, and the example of discounting certain pitches by I don't know if it's 10 times or 10%, but irrespective of how you discount them, and then multiplying certain other pitches accordingly is a manifestation of that awareness, being conscious of the fact that human beings are different, beginning with men and women are different, and making sure there's you act accordingly in this, and there's the right space for everyone. So long-winded answer to your question, but very comfortable. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. So I think that's just a very good introduction. We've heard about topics from toilets to nursing rooms to the ways female entrepreneurs pitch in a very nuanced way. So I think let's just shift the conversation into something a lot more constructive, right? Because at the end of it, we're talking about how can we help? How can we help the ladies accelerate their careers, and what kind of tips can we have? I'm actually going to field one question, and this time I'm going to direct it to Kat and Alex. There's a question from Natasha, and the question here is, how should women push for more C-suite roles? Should we be coming up with new ideas, or are we just trying to break through barriers in very traditional organizations, right? And I think in terms of statistics, it echoes, because right now, I think Deloitte just recently reported that women, they only hold 12% of seats worldwide, only 4% are chairing boards. So clearly, there's this big gap. So let's just go back and answer Natasha's question. How can women, go for the C-suite roles?
Okay. When you first mentioned it, you'd said, how can we get more women into the C-suite? So is it more women into the C-suite, or how do we get these women into the C-suite? The reason I ask is because I think to solve the systemic problem in a large corporation, you have to have more women getting to the C-suite. You have to have more women, right? It's inevitable. It's that sort of entropy. You're going to have to get more in. The challenge is often people bring in people at the very bottom of the organization. There are no role models, and you see them all filter out, right? Because they're having to fight at every stage to actually break that glass ceiling. It's just lower and lower. So as you want to get it higher and higher, it helps to have women above you. So you have to be bringing in women. If you are short of women at certain levels, whilst you build that organization, you have to bring women in more senior that can act as role models. I mean, it's something actually Stan Chart's been doing that I'm very impressed by, is the number of interesting, experienced, highly capable women that they're bringing in at senior levels. So that does make that easier, which means, of course, through time, and once you get that balance out through the organization, you should be able to get some more of those into the C-suite.
Alex?
I was going to bring up a word that has been controversial at times, depending on the culture and the jurisdiction we're in, which is quotas. And broaden the concept a little more. I was initially not a friend of quotas because I thought they were a little imposed and not necessarily as authentic and as natural as things should be. And over the years, kind of changed my mind. I have to say that I've changed my mind. One, because I've seen them at work and I've seen them work to some extent, and two, because when trying to do things, whether it's in business or elsewhere, there's an element of having a reality check, and that reality check is often in the numbers. So irrespective of whether a company, a bank, or firm has a particular quota for the board or for the management teams, I think there's an element of being quite disciplined and sort of rigorous about checking the numbers and understanding how diverse you really are. If you're claiming you want to be, and checking back on the numbers, it just gives that reality check, which is important. To the extent the numbers don't say what you think they should say, then you have a problem, and so you have to address the problem. And I would agree with Kat that it starts with a bench. If you're going to have a diverse team at the top, you need a diverse bench. And bench means at every level of the organization. Maybe we have a bit of a conversation about hiring relatively diversely at the junior level of the organization and then losing people on the way, which is a problem I've seen in transaction banking before in a number of different businesses, and it's really worth thinking about. Ranging from female bathrooms to other problems that are all very real actually. There's also an element of bringing the role models. There's also an element of imposing it to ourselves when we're hiring for a new position, for example, to have a diverse bench of talent apply and review very diverse profiles. And so forth. But there's some of the obvious things that it takes to rectify an imbalance if your numbers are telling you that there is an imbalance. But I go back to the numbers; they're pretty important. It'll tell you how well you're really doing.
Yep. So that's a good point. I think at the end of it, numbers. What gets measured gets done, right? Yeah. So in this case, and you mentioned the word disciplined. So when the numbers are there, it actually drives and forces some form of discipline, especially within an organization. So thanks, Alex. Thanks, Kat. So I'm going to take a step back because we do have a question here. And this time, I think Ross's question is for you. I think, Tanya, feel free to jump in. We spoke about female entrepreneurs pitching, correct? And ladies tend to be a bit more measured, a bit more nuanced. So one question here is, any tips for pitching? Especially for the female entrepreneurs, how do they carry themselves better? And just any tips, especially for the both of you. You've done it countless number of times. You've seen it. Just any tips for the female entrepreneurs here?
I actually got help after I was told they were dividing, multiplying my numbers times 10. So I actually went to a guy who helped, at accelerators, teach people how to pitch. And so he deconstructed everything I did and reconstructed it, and emphasized a lot more track record and how big it would be. So I actually would encourage people to get help, to have someone listen to you pitch and distill it down to the 3 minutes, right? How do you say what you need to say, in 3 minutes or in 60 seconds? And that helped me tremendously. I was able to raise 60 million US after that. But before that, I wasn't able to raise 1 cent. It was just my husband's money, my children's money. So I would say, get some help, get a professional. That changed me forever.
Amazing. How about Tanya? Any tips?
That's very good advice, for sure. Clearly worked really well for us. It's an interesting one because actually one of the ways that we do things quite differently at HerCapital is we don't make women founders pitch. And the reason behind that is we've seen a number of awesome pitches from people delivering amazing pitches, and not a lot of substance, and business idea could be terrible. And equally, we've seen terrible pitches from women that are experts in their business, in their industry. They execute brilliantly, and they've got a great opportunity with their business, and yet cannot pitch so well. So we've taken the decision that it's more of a conversation, and we delve into. So I'm not a pitching expert, but I do appreciate that pitching is very important for a lot of the more traditional funds. And of course, not everyone is receiving capital from a HerCapital or a fund like ours. So pitching, of course, is very important. And interestingly, I was on Clubhouse last week, and I like to just listen into some of the pitches, and there was a chap on there, could have been a woman, it's not a gender thing, but his pitch went something like this. It was very monotone, and he could have been talking about something really exciting, but I have no idea because I didn't listen because it was so boring. So you've definitely got to have a lot of passion behind your business idea. And some of the feedback, of course, I pitch a lot for HerCapital. I raise money for HerCapital, and I promote HerCapital, and I'm the lead pitcher. And I think for me, the number one thing that gets across, that is well received, should I say, is the passion. Perhaps I could be talking about anything, but people believe in what I'm saying because I'm super passionate about it. I believe every word I say, and I think that goes such a long way with the pitch. But as I said, we don't make people pitch, so I'm not an expert on what is a good or bad pitch. All I know is from my experience that I get a lot of feedback around your passion is abundantly clear. Let's get a second meeting. So I think that is would be my only input I could have on this point.
Okay, so there's one word that I could hear was really passion, right? So people here on call, remember passion. Passion is very important. Cannot be bought. You really need to bring it out innately. Hey, Alex.
Yeah. I'll add to this. A couple of first echoing some of the comments, and then maybe add one more dimension. Bit of a personal story as well. The echoing the point about rehearsing. If you're going to pitch, you have to rehearse. As a banker, I refuse to go to pitches. Certainly, any meaningful pitches that we wouldn't have rehearsed before. And I sort of hated the improvisation, in a client's office of, you do this part, I do that part. It's just mediocre. So rehearsing a minimum is important. In SC Ventures, we run an intrapreneur program. It's about people stepping forward, wanting to realize their ideas. Fernn, you're very, very familiar with that. When they step forward, they ultimately have to pitch at some point. We have actually been providing a fair amount of help and rehearsals and advice to intrapreneurial teams pitching. And it's I find it to be a really enriching experience. By the way, both for the receiving end of the advice, but also for people working on it, because everyone learns something in that process. I was going to add one word to the qualities of the pitch. It's authentic. The best pitches I've seen in my career may have been from a female leader. I reported to her at some point for a brief period of time. She ran global capital markets in one of her previous firms. She was a ferocious pitcher, and what I mean by ferocious is incredibly effective. Very humble demeanor, almost understated at times, yet very confident, without arrogance, but confidence, assertive, but very importantly, authentic. Came across this way, and clients can smell it when you're not authentic. They they do sense it when you are. It was a very, very powerful thing to see in action. So, you cannot fake authenticity, I guess. So, but that's an important ingredient in a pitch.
So Alex, I'm really happy that you use the word authentic, because that is exactly just one question from the audience here, and it's by Anonymous, but that's all right. The question here is for the panelist. Any tips for ladies who would like to break through the barriers while trying to stay authentic? Being true to themselves as individuals, right? So the context here is when we ladies start to ask for tips, it's always very natural. Oh, you need to behave a little bit more like men. You need to go speak with a lower voice. Or you need to learn how to flex. So, going back to the topic of authenticity, any tips, right? Ladies, how do you stay authentic while trying to balance this pressure of the naysayers who tell you you need to, flex a bit more like men?
Actually, this is quite opportune, because I work with somebody who's super smart, really, really much smarter than I am, highly capable, great track record, all this sort of stuff. And I said to her after I've been working with her a bit, wow, you do smile, right? Because she's always quite stern-faced. And she said, well, and she is very young. So she said, I'm very young and I want to be seen as professional. And I said, well, look, the most important thing is you have to engage. And if people don't feel you're being authentic because you're keeping up that barrier, you cannot get that kind of engagement and that kind of bond with people. And I said, also, if you can't smile because you're feeling you have to act like somebody else, you're maybe in the wrong organization, right? Because you have to, don't lose who you are for a job. And I think that's crucially important. It's you can't be somebody different. And otherwise you might find, what is it that there's some expression about, having got to the top of the mountain, she suddenly wondered why she was at the top of the mountain, right? And I sometimes wonder whether, male and female, whether you're fighting, you're so focused on getting to the top that you sometimes think, I'm on the wrong bloody mountain, right? And I think that's very much, we got to be very careful about taking stock of, just because everybody else is doing that doesn't mean you have to do it, right? And often, just being female, on certain cases, actually being female is a huge advantage, right? In a group of technologists, used to be I could be in a room of 500 people and about 4 women. I mean, it was fantastic. At least they'd know you were there, and you would stand out automatically. It did mean you had problems to make sure, A, you weren't the event organizer, or that you actually had to have some substance, because you were going to be shot down quite quickly otherwise. But I do think being authentic and really standing by what's important to you is the only way you're going to get actually where you want to go, as opposed to just up.
I would echo that, actually, Kat. I feel I'm faced with an awful lot of naysayers, as you call them, Fernn, with regards to what we're doing, because we're obviously two female fund managers in Southeast Asia, not a lot of female-focused funds here, raising capital to give to women-led companies, which, as I pointed out earlier, is also not a common thing to be doing in this space. And you know, it's obvious that I'm going to face a lot of pushback because I'm challenging. I'm also not from Asia as well. My business partner is, but I'm not from Asia, and I lead our sort of client-facing, our fundraising, and so I'm the sort of face of HerCapital. So you know, the odds are stacked quite firmly against me and are challenging. But when I'm faced with something, and I often am, you know, at least once a week, I'm faced with something that is either inappropriate or just not supportive of what we're doing. So someone will say something like, "Don't invest into women; it's a bit off-putting," or you know, I've had that. That's a serious thing. Or people commenting on my accent, and all sorts of random things. These are just not people that I want to do business with. So, and of course, it's not that you can just keep walking away from people whenever anyone says something that's a little challenging, but you have to also accept and acknowledge. And going to your point, Kat, if you're having to, you know, if I had to go and change my entire strategy, okay, well then I won't invest in women, I'll invest in men just to suit you. You know, clearly I'm not going to do that. So these are not my investors. These are not my people that I should be surrounding myself. And I just, you know, lick my wounds and go and find the people that are. And that isn't always easy because, you know, there's a lot of the naysayers. So, you know, it is tough, but they're definitely, it's definitely the best route for me personally on my career journey is to seek out the people that are your supporters and are your champions, and allow you to keep that authenticity and the passion and the things that are really important to me as personally in my career, but also at HerCapital.
I think the naysayers exist because you're an entrepreneur, right? I think it's inevitable. I think, Ros, you'd probably echo that, wouldn't you? That you get no just because you're doing something weird.
Yeah, no, I think being real and being authentic is so important for us. So there are always naysayers, but we're gonna try to hit that hole in one, right? That's why we're founders, and it's just a miracle to still be alive as a startup. So I'm very happy. I never let the naysayers bother me because there are so many. So, and a lot of times in InsurTech, I am the only female, right? It's just male panels and me. And so I just try to tell the truth always.
You will, by definition, get naysayers as an entrepreneur. I mean, it's the world is plenty of people reminding you that a mountain isn't meant to be moved. So if you're going to go and move a mountain, there'll be people reminding you that it's hard, and you know, one way or another. I can see this.
I'm used to falling off. So Alex, you're right. I'm used to the boulder falling on top of me from the top of the mountain, flattening me every day. But I just have to get back up and keep pushing that boulder up the mountain.
Very well done. Well done.
And Ross, I remember you gave, I mean, we've spoken on several panels together, and I always remember you said that, if there are two paths to choose the tougher one.
Oh yeah,
Correct?
Choose the harder path. Otherwise,
yeah.
Anyone can choose the easy path. That's just status quo, right? Yep.
All right. So we've got a lot of questions coming in, so I'm going to move our attention to the highly voted ones. This one is probably for the ladies. Have you ever felt that you had to compromise your family for success? Do you think women tend to feel more guilty?
Always.
100%.
Look, I've never not felt guilty, right? So I've always felt guilty about work. I've always felt guilty about the kids, right? Especially when I found out I was commuting to KL, my daughter had epilepsy. Like, that's like a come to Jesus moment. Like, what? I'm the mother. What happened here, right? So the guilt you feel as a mother is immense. And Fern's heard me before. The only time I ever never felt guilty was when my daughter was like 25. It took 25 years. And it was only because she told me, when she was crying one day, and when I was asking her, what do you want to be when you grow up anyways? And she said, look, Mommy, I want to be like you. Right. And I never knew that because she used to make me drop her off like miles from her school. I always felt guilty. I thought she was ashamed of me. But when she said that, that's the first time I never felt guilty. It took me 25 years.
Yeah, and I think if you look at COVID and the big step back that it's had for women, the number of women who've had to leave their jobs because in countries where you're not fortunate enough to have help, the parent has to make a choice, and it's often that the female's not earning as much as the male, and so she's had to take a job out. So I think, I can't remember what the numbers were, but it's something like 8 times more women have lost their jobs than men in the States. And so it's dramatic. And that's definitely a problem. And I've got 4 kids, and they, when they were very young, when I had my own company, it was definitely difficult. So I'd find ways to try and bring them into the office or things like that, which was chaos. Luckily, my colleagues were very understanding, and did little games with them. But sometimes, you just, you'd find yourself coming home. Dinner for me was the one thing that you couldn't move. Right, so having dinner together as a family, and then I would go back to work afterwards, after they were in bed. But I was lucky enough to have a role model, and this comes back to that whole point of actually having people that you can look up to. My mother went back to university at 35 because she hated being a teacher. She went to study at Hong Kong University, and she did architecture. And so she had 3 kids under 5, and was trying to do this at the time. And I remember, she'd be asleep at her drafting table and stuff like that. And I remember her asking me, and what I felt about her as a mother. And for me, there was no question. She was always there for me. It had nothing to do with the hours. But there's no question. My mum has never been not been there for me, right? It had nothing to do with her being in the room or anything like that. It's the fact that she would make herself available. And this was before you had mobile phones. You could call any second.
So I know that I directed Yes, Alex. I wanted to ask, do daddies feel guilty?
Well, for start, and answer is yes. The daddies make a number of trade-offs as well between work and family, between career and family, and they have a cost. I was just reflecting on the question: do women feel more guilty than men? And my observation would be maybe that's the case at an earlier stage in life, and there's a later stage in life which I guess I've reached where things get back to you anyways. I have 4 children, of which two young adults, one who's I guess should be a young adult, but he's not quite sure he wants to be that. And at least one teenager left, the conversations we have now are quite interesting. So things that I thought I was comfortable with at the time, such as quality time we spend on the weekend where I'm not working. Yeah, you were there, but you weren't really there because you had a conference call. Or yeah, you did this and that, but then you weren't here for me when I needed that, and etc. So really interesting. It gets back to you a little bit later, and I would hesitate to say that there's a difference in degree of guilt between one and the other. Perhaps the timing, perhaps the way in which we express it, but it's undeniable that we make modern life or intense jobs, careers, endeavors has required us all to make these trade-offs and the very meaningful life decisions for every one of us.
So maybe just to balance the discussion here, right? So to everyone on the call, yes, daddies and mummies, as long as you're a parent, it's always natural to feel guilty. Sometimes I always feel that ladies tend to, we always say, oh, mommies feel guilty, but actually I think daddies feel guilty too, right?
Whatever I do, it cannot be right? It will never be.
Well, that's parenting. That's just parenting. But I think that the difference is that I think a lot of, so for example, when I went on a business trip, if my husband was at home, it would be very different. I would feel much less guilty because they were having dedicated attention. So again, I think it depends on your family dynamic. If you have a stay-at-home parent, whether male or female, I think as the working parent, it is much easier to have a balance. And I think so therefore parenting in an ideal world is a partnership, because you are taking, you're managing your schedules. My husband and I always managed our schedules, so we were never away together, and things like that. So your choice of partner is probably one of them. It's a huge decision anyway, but really your choice of co-parent is a big one, right?
I would agree with that.
Okay, time really flies when you're enjoying yourself. We actually only have 8 minutes left. Still, questions are streaming in. So I'm going to just shift in, and this one is also highly voted. What are some of your learnings and experiences in building credibility in a very fast-paced industry, especially for women? That we have a tendency to only speak up when we are very, 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 very sure. So the question here is really about, building a sense of credibility. But I think behind the scenes, we only speak up when we are like 100% sure, right? So any tips here?
So it comes back to that expression, you have to be twice as good to be as twice as good as a man to be considered half as good, right? So there is that, we definitely, I think as a gender stereotype, there is that need to feel confident. So I think the key thing is to work out what you're good at, right? What is your skill? And make sure that is where you play to. So, typically, a lot of women put themselves in roles where they're project managers. And if they've taken time off to look after their kids, they're naturally good project managers, right? So if that's your thing, that's where you play. Make sure you get into roles where you can really shine in those and get to the lead of that and do it very well. And because, again, you can become an expert. It doesn't matter which area it is, but just make yourself an expert in whatever it is, but be very good at it, because then you really can make them. And then no one questions. Right?
So I agree with Kat. I do agree with Kat. I mean, I think results matter, right? It's not what you say, it's the results that happen because of you that you can talk about. So when I first moved into the insurance industry, I was from outside, and they gave me, they told me, okay, you have all these men in Japan, all these men in Korea, all these men in India. I don't know why I had no female reportees, people reporting to me. So can you imagine? I was an American, like strike 1. I was female, strike 2, and I was like Chinese, strike 3. And so I had to prove myself, and it wasn't about talking. It was really about moving us from, and this was like a broken division, moving us from, getting smaller and smaller every year, going there and moving us to hyper growth, right? They hadn't grown in 30 years. My job was to get the hyper growth. So we grew at 800% in short order, but I had to crack heads, right? I had to have a strategy. I had to outsell all the men. That's how I gained credibility, by winning, right? And being humble about it and getting everyone to collaborate and getting 14 countries to stop fighting each other and to work together. So yeah, I agree, Kat. We work twice as hard to be half as good, and results matter.
I think you just have to get over yourself. Actually, I was on the BBC News at the end of last year, and I wrote an article, and the BBC News said, can I interview you about females in venture capital? And I'd never been on the news before, and this was going out on the global news, so worldwide news, first interview. I didn't sleep all night, and I spoke to a friend of mine who's head of comms at Google in KL, and she talked for about half an hour about how I should prepare for this. And then she said, actually, Tanya, I'm just going to tell you one thing. And I said, well, actually, you've given me half an hour of advice, which I've just panicked over. And then she told me one thing. And she said, get over yourself. She said, just get over yourself and just talk. You're talking about the thing you know, you're confident, you know your stuff, get over yourself. And I didn't sleep that night because I had to be awake at 3 a.m. for this interview. But I was walking around my office with my laptop ready for my interview in the very early hours of the morning. And I was saying, get over yourself, Tanya, get over yourself, Tanya, on repeat. And I kid you not, it absolutely worked. And I remember that now all the time. This is not about my panic or my worry, what are people going to think? I need to get across my point. I need to get over myself to achieve what I need to achieve. And that, I think, is amazing advice. And I messaged her immediately after and I said, it went really well. I thought about get over yourself, Tanya. About 20 times I said it out loud like a crazy person, but it absolutely worked. So that would be my advice.
One more thing is you have to put your hand up. I think that's another thing that women aren't so good at. You know, the headhunter who says the guy will say he can do it when he can only do half of them, and the girl will say, I can only do half of them, right? So it's a case of saying, you know, if you think there's a chance you could do it, put your damn hand up and say, you know, challenge. It's me. I want to take that job. Try do it. Do it, because some other person's going to be trying to do it, and they're probably just as qualified or lack of qualifications as you've got. So just put your hand up, get it done.
Perfect. You know, at the start of this session, I knew that this panel that we're going to have, you know, has absolute chemistry and everyone's, you know, we're just all synchronized. Kat, thank you very much for that, because we are 2 minutes to 6 p.m. And in terms of closing thoughts, I was just wondering, you know, the theme this year is really choose the challenge. And for us, it's really about challenge for change, right? So, you know, maybe let's just go one round. Just, you know, if we could just share one word to encourage the audience here, put your hand up. Okay, maybe more than one word, but you know, maybe any parting tips for the audience here. Can I just share with you that in terms of attendees, we've had more than 130 attendees throughout the entire hour, which means that you know, everyone's really looking to you guys for tips. Anyone?
I think there's Sheryl
Sandberg.
Sandberg's comment, lean in, you know, the name of her book. Totally, I think that's the same kind of thing, but lean in, just lean in, have fun, and get in and do it. Lean in.
My hashtag that I use on all my social media posts and my motto of my life, my pajamas, everything is fortune favors the bold. And I believe that to be true.
I guess if I had one word, it would be dare, right? Dare yourself to go for it, right? Just do it.
It's so great. How do I complement that? I would just say life's way too short to not be yourself. So by all means, break the glass ceiling, get over yourself. You know, like Tanya said, dare, be bold, lean in, but be yourself. And if the organization you're pitching to isn't going to have you as yourself, then you didn't want to pitch there in the first place.
All right. So thanks very much, everyone. We've had a wonderful 1 hour together. Plenty of tips. You know, we really talked about a range of things, from toilets to nursing rooms, to alignment of values, to being brave and being authentic. I've personally learned a lot from this session today, and I hope the attendees here would also feel the same. You know, on behalf of everyone, on behalf of SC Ventures, I just really want to say thank you so much to my panelists, Kat, Tanya, Alex, Ross, for really taking the time to be here today. And to my attendees, you know, I hope that the session was great for you guys. Oh, we've got comments saying that you guys are fabulous. So well done, everyone. So I'm really looking forward to connecting with everyone. Yes,
thank you,
challenge for change.
Yeah, like a Vulcan mind meld. You know, I feel like it should be Spock. You know, but,
Yes,
happy
be yourself.
International Women's Day.
Yes, correct.
Bye.
Happy one, everyone.
All
Thanks
right.
to our panelists.
Thanks
Thank you.
very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.